Hello everyone, I'm Jarman and I'm really here today to tell you a little bit about my journey in media and how I got to where I am today professionally. Now, to me this meant going through many turning points in my journey, and by turning points I mean is steering away from the straight path I was on and taking up more unconventional and creative routes. Now, obviously, this meant pushing a lot of boundaries. It meant taking a lot of risky decisions and making some challenging decisions as well. And most of all, it really meant defying and ignoring the social taboo of Emirati women working in media. It's still whispered that it's not the most reputable or conventional job for a female to be working in television specifically. But if I listened to any of this or hesitated even once, I would probably be working somewhere I do not like, and I would not be here standing in front of you today. So that really was my first turning point. It was when I made the conscious decision to pursue the workforce or industry I was passionate about. Now, based on that decision, obviously, I started off in media, and I started off in a very simple role, which was in the scheduling department. Now, in that department, really, I had a very comfortable job. I excelled in my job. It paid fine, very flexible working hours. There was really nothing to complain about. But then there had to be a turning point in my life where I was hungry to educate myself more. I needed to be inspired more. I needed to know more about media. And I made a conscious decision again, a turning point in my life, where I steered away from that comfortable path, got out of my comfort zone, and resorted to a more challenging job. I shifted to another department. I started a job that I was totally clueless about. I had no idea how it worked, and it required a lot of my time and effort, which I was willingly going to compromise because I needed to be inspired all the time. So as I progressed and as I moved on to that role, my turning points and decisions became even harder. As you progress, obviously, you work hard, you do your research, you do your homework, and then your turning points in life become tougher. So at that stage, there was an even tougher turning point where it was related more on the professional level, the TV station I was working on. And at this turning point, I always say conventionality is the refuge of a stagnant mind. If you keep thinking conventionally, you will not achieve great results. So this specific professional turning point, I'd like to make a comparison to this movie, Moneyball. I don't know how many of you have seen Moneyball or are familiar with it. Okay, so very briefly, the concept of Moneyball really is to think of unconventional methods to succeed. So Moneyball, they were the little league teams. They were the underdogs, as they called themselves, and they were competing with the big leagues that had their multi-million-dollar players and they had their big budgets. And they were expected to compete fairly. So obviously that was not possible. They had to resort to unconventional and different methods of positioning themselves and defeating in the games. So what they did, they adapted a mathematical formula of how to play a baseball game. Very strange, very peculiar. And they hired and fired players based on that mathematical formula who fit that specific set of skills. They did not pay one penny more or increased any of their budgets. So the concept I bring with Moneyball, and I like to make a comparison to my professional life, or that professional decision, was basically about us having to compete with these media-seasoned industries out there in the Middle East that had their big brands, they were big names, they had their big budgets, they had loyal viewers, they had the highest ratings, and we were still a very young and premature company or product at that time. So we, in our term, had to resort to unconventional methods to compete, and it was a hard decision that needed to be made. It was not my personal decision, it was more of a collaborative effort, but really the point here is to produce local Emirati shows in English. Now, we're all accustomed to Arabic shows. We see Arabic talk shows, we see movies, we see series all the time in Arabic. But to have English locally produced shows that engage with the community, that address issues with our community, was a gap in the market that we filled. Now, obviously, this was not a traditional formula. It was, again, unconventional. It was criticized. It was skeptical. Seasoned media veterans were questioning it. It was really a contentious viewpoint that was argued against all the time. But at that point, it was a decision needed to be made to position ourselves differently from the competitor. And it worked. We were glad that it started off and it created for itself that niche in the market. Now, these are just a couple of key points, as you see, that help me go through my journey. It's basically decision-making that I have to go through. It's the action, and then how I motivate and keep focused and keep disciplining myself all the time to create better results. And of course, the more you achieve, the more you grow, and by default. Of course, I was led by example. It's very important to have specific role models in your life, and I didn't just have one, I had many, not very direct, but all the women who've had turning points in their lives, all the women who pioneered in fields that there was no one in before, obviously converted to unconventional methods. And we have our first Emirati female judge, we have our first Emirati female pilot, first minister, and not just in the UAE, but even regionally in Saudi Arabia, the author of Girls of Riyadh, very unconventional book, but she's a renowned bestseller, international bestseller right now. And on a personal level, I was fortunate enough to be empowered by Her Excellency Najla Al-Awadi, who really motivates and empowers young Emirati females, which was a very important element to support me at that time in my career. Now, moving on from then, I come down to a very personal turning point in my life, which is these two girls. These are my daughters, and they are constantly demanding of me to be at home, a nurturing mom, obviously. But I made the final turning point here. I made a final decision where I needed to be a role model for them and show them that it is okay to be a working mom. There really is no either-or choice here. You can do both as long as you give quality of time to each, your work and obviously your family. So I needed to exemplify this for them and obviously lead by example and show them that it is okay to do both and have that unconventional or whatever route you need to take. And really, finally, this brings me to the end of my very humble talk, which is about your turn. Where has been your turning point? You're in the boring job. You have an idea, you don't know where to take from. You're in the straight path, you don't know how to get out of. You really need to start thinking unconventionally. Don't think in the traditional methods. Think of ways where you need to be steering your own route or steering out of that boring route, taking new chances. And I always say, really, stay hungry to develop yourself and stay hungry to educate yourself as you go. And with that, you'll achieve great results, really. So thank you.